Hello and welcome to this MGTV special, Community Questions City Budget. My name is Ron Beacom. In this program, you'll find out the proposed change for your City of Midland property tax bill, what services are emphasized in the city's budget, and what factors have an impact on the city's budget and services. Now here's the timeline for the city's budget process. City manager presented the proposed budget at the City Council meeting on April 13th. Then council is expected to act on the budget at the council meeting on May 18th. So in the 5 weeks in between, council will hold a special budget workshop and 2 public hearings to get your input. We've put together a roundtable again to discuss what's on the table. My guests are the mayor of the City of Midland, Maureen Donker, the city manager, John Lynch, and the assistant city manager for financial services, Dave Keenan. So welcome to all of you again. See you again each year. Now, I should point out that we're talking about the budget for fiscal year 2015-16, which our budget year starts July 1. So Dave, let's get right to the numbers like we always do. What's the proposed millage rate and how does it compare to, say, the current fiscal year?
Well, the current year, the millage rate is 15.04. The budget that was proposed to council last Monday includes a millage rate of 14.89. So it's actually a slight reduction from the current year millage rate.
Now let's break down the numbers. How is that the millage distributed?
There are about 3 or 4 different components of the millage rate. The first is what we consider general operating, and that's going to be 12.58 mils, which is the same rate that it is this year and the same rate that it was last year. Within that millage rate, though, we were able to realign or reappropriate some of the funding towards stormwater activities, which is something we've been trying to do over the last couple of years. It also includes 1 mil for library operations, which is consistent with what we've done in the past. Public safety for the police and fire pension has a special millage. That's actually going down from 1.18 mils down to 1.05. And then we have, finally, there's a millage that relates to bonded indebtedness that the community approved back in 2001. And because we refinanced our bonds this past year, we're able to reduce that specific millage from 0.28 down to 0.26. So the 2 reductions in public safety and the bonded indebtedness allows us to reduce our overall millage rate from 15.04 down to 14.89.
Now let's do a little bit of government 101. Let's first talk about the millage rate means what? That number compared to $1,000.
1 mil is $1 of tax you pay for each $1,000 of taxable value.
And the taxable value of a home is what? I'm not asking for a dollar amount right now, but the concept.
Oh, the concept is taxable value is approximately half of what it's worth on the market.
Okay, so we assess tax based on that.
Part of it, yes. It's more complicated because you have to consider the state's cost of living increase and what the value was last year, but essentially it's about half of what it's worth on the market.
So let's turn the millage rate and what you just explained into dollars for the owner of the average price home in the City of Midland.
The owner of the average priced home is about $140,000 market. So if you take the proposed millage rate of 14.89 mils and you apply it to the value of that home, you'd get, on average, that person would pay $87 a month in taxes.
So $87 a month on the average price home. So Mayor, I recall attending your State of the City address in March, got some video of you there, and you broke down some of your monthly household bills. So how does that number compare to what you pay in other bills in your home?
Well, I did that because I think it's important. Often people think about taxes and they think about it negatively. And I think really the question that we should be asking ourselves is, do I receive something of value for what I pay? So I took the monthly rate and averaged it for my home. Or if you took the $140,000 average home and took $87, that's what you would pay in taxes to the City of Midland. Well, then I took my 2014 cell phone bills, and we have 4 cell phones in our home, and I averaged that over 12 months. The average monthly amount that I pay for cell phones is $200.36. Now, for the $87, I think you're really getting something of value in Midland. You get, 2,700 acres of parkland, you get trash pickup, we have a safe community, police and fire, and those are just a few things that I talked about. I think you really do receive something of value for what you pay in the City of Midland.
Well, let me jump back over to Dave. We should point out that the 2 times a year people pay taxes, not all that money goes to the city.
Not all that money goes to the city. The city keeps Probably going to be about a third when you look at the total millage that's going to be coming up in the next fiscal year. The city also collects money for the school districts, and there are three. There's Black Creek and Bay City, in addition to Midland Public Schools. We also collect money for Midland County, for Bay County, the intermediate school districts for both Midland County and Bay County, the state of Michigan, and Delta College. So you put all those together, the city gets about a third of that, and the rest of it they pay out to those entities.
And that's by state statute why we do the
Correct.
collecting. Okay. So John, we put all this together and we turn to you. Any changes in services that will be provided by the city next year?
Unfortunately, no. One of the goals of the City Council set forth to us before we started developing the budget was to maintain our service delivery at the highest level possible, and we won't be reducing or eliminating any of the direct services currently offered. The good news in all of this is that we'll actually be spending a little more money on some infrastructure in the upcoming fiscal year. So it's a good outcome.
And then the total consolidated budget for the city is approximately $90 million, correct?
That's correct.
So not all of that, though, comes from property tax dollars. Can you
Right.
get into the different funds that are involved?
I'll do that. I actually have a neat chart that I'll share with you. If you look at this, you're correct. $90.6 million is what the consolidated budget is. And out of that amount, about 43% of the costs are going to be paid for by taxes. And it's not just the money that comes into the general fund. We've got the money going into the library, we've got debt service, we've got county road millage that comes into the major street fund. So all that goes into that number. The next largest revenue stream that's paying for all of these services would be fees for services. And that includes everything from renting a pavilion at, let's say, Emerson Park, to paying your apartment rent, one of our senior apartments, to maybe going skating at the Civic Arena, or paying your utility bill. You put all those together, and that takes about 35% of burden off the budget. You add those two together, you're pushing almost 80% of paying for all the costs. The next largest one we have is about 10% coming from other governmental units, and that's primarily state revenue sharing, gas and weight tax, some federal grants. So that gives you the distribution of how we're actually going to pay for the services that we're going to provide over the next year.
And let me make a clarification, or allow you to. When we say utility bill, when it comes to City of Midland, we're talking water and sewer.
Water and sewer, yes.
We're nothing to do with a gas or a light bill or anything like that. Consumers takes care of that here.
We hope, yeah.
And the services, and it touches a little bit on what the mayor talked about, the property tax dollar, the services supported by that, what are some of the specific ones there?
Sure. There's, within the general fund itself, the mayor had mentioned already public safety, and we're going to spend about $17 million on public safety next year. I got another cool graphic here. About $17 million for police, fire, building inspection, and planning. The other thing that seems to be pretty popular with the citizens is curbside pickup. You put stuff out to the curb and somebody takes it away. Whether it's refuse, heavy item, recycling, or yard waste, we're going to spend about $3 million on that next year. We also support the library, believe it or not. The library has its own budget, but it does receive 1 mil of property tax. It also receives a contribution from the general fund to support the budget as a whole. We're going to spend about $4.1 million in total in the library. Another item outside of the general fund is our dial-a-ride system, where the general fund will provide about $700,000 support for that. The other thing is, I mentioned on my opening statements about stormwater management. This year we're going to spend $1.1 million on stormwater management. So that's an increase and a decent change. And finally, I'll come back to parks, parks and recreation. We have, as the mayor mentioned, 72 parks, 2,700 acres. It's a big part of making Midland what it is, and it's not without a price. We'll spend about $5.5 million supporting the parks and recreation and forestry programs during the next fiscal year.
Well, let's talk big picture second, John, with our park system. I mean, how does Midlands compare to neighboring cities or other cities around the state that you often make comparisons in terms of the size, our commitment to it?
Well, if you were to consider the land area dedicated to parks in Midland and compare it to the neighbors, let's say Mount Pleasant, Saginaw, and Bay City, you would have to double all of the park land held by all three of those communities, more than double, to get to an equivalent amount of acreage dedicated to public park space.
And I can speak as a homeowner here. The two homes we've owned have both been on those pocket parks, and it's just a great feature to have.
The neighborhood parks are typically rather popular and usually fairly well used.
When we come back, we'll find out how the City Council set priorities for this year's budget, and we'll find out what those priorities are.
City Council will hold several meetings to review and discuss the City Manager's proposed budget for 2015-16. A special budget workshop will be held on Monday, April 20th, beginning at 6 p.m. in Council Chambers at City Hall. The Council will hold 2 public hearings during regularly scheduled Council meetings on Mondays, April 27th and May 11th. Those meetings start at 7 p.m. Council is scheduled to adopt the budget at its meeting on Monday, May 18th, also beginning at 7 p.m. If you can't attend these meetings in person, watch them live or replayed on Midland Government Television, Channel 188 on Charter Communications, or through Channel 99 on AT&T's UVerse. Or you can view them online on the city's website at www.cityofmidlandmi.gov/mctv.
You are watching Community Questions, City Budget, and MGTV Special. My name is Ron Beacom. If you're just joining us, my guests are Dave Keenan, the Assistant City Manager for Financial Services, John Lynch, City Manager, and Maureen Donker, the Mayor of the City of Midland. Our topic is the proposed budget for the next fiscal year starting in July. So now we're going to talk about how the city put it together. So what was the process? How did we get it started this time, John?
Well, it's the typical process. We've used the same approach for about the last 8 years. And we begin in January by talking with council about what their long-range goals and priorities will be. And we spend a day-long session at that time, usually on a Saturday. And my goal coming out of that is to understand clearly from council what their expectations are with respect to service delivery and the relative millage rate headed into the upcoming fiscal year. So they tell us what's on their mind after hearing about our current financial position, and then we use those inputs as targets to build the budget.
But Mayor, this year you had additional input from the public. What happened there?
This year we reach out to the public frequently. About every 3 to 5 years we reach out because it's important for us to hear from them and what's important to them and to make sure that they're aware of what's going on in their community. So we did hold coffee with council, we'll call them coffee with council or coffee with wards. Each of the council persons in there had a coffee with council meeting in their ward, which was very nice. So in Ward 2, I was able to get together with residents of my ward and hear from them what's important, and all the other council members did that. And then that culminated with a full coffee with council at the end. So again, that was an opportunity for us to hear what's important to the residents of our community. In addition to that, there was a survey that was also done. So, and about 300 people participated in that, or more?
Almost twice that.
Twice,
yeah.
Okay. Almost 600 people participated in that. So we were able to reach out to them to find out also how they were feeling, even though they weren't able, to attend those one-on-one or those personal kind of meetings. So it's important for us to always hear from people what's on their minds and what they value.
We should credit Saginaw Valley, a group there assisted us with this.
Right, we worked with Dr. John Kaczynski from the Henry Marsh Institute for Public Policy at Saginaw Valley, and he and his team built and conducted the survey on the front end of the process, and then they also essentially moderated these individual sessions within the 5 wards that were conducted with the members of council.
So we had the survey, we had the face-to-face meetings. What were some of the outcomes?
Roads.
Right. Yeah.
Roads, sidewalks.
Yeah, this is where the comment I made earlier about infrastructure really showed up. Over the last several years, our budgets have been very conservative, and there are places where we knew we needed to be spending money, but we just didn't have the resources to concentrate on. So sidewalks, for example. Our sidewalk maintenance programs over the last 4 years have been minimal. And that showed up in citizen comments and concerns. They told us we really want to see the city taking care of the sidewalks. We definitely want to see the city taking care of the roadways. We'd like to see investment in tree replacement, recognizing that we've had a few tough years handling invasive species, and there's been an erosion of the urban forestry network. Also concerns about maintaining open ditches and drainage ways. So all of those points are addressed in the proposed budget. In roads, for example, in the current fiscal year, which will end this June, we're building and maintaining about 8 miles, linear miles, lane miles of roadways. In the proposed budget, we'll be doing the same over roughly 14 miles of roadways. So there's a much higher emphasis. We're coming off the back end of the addition of the countywide road millage, which helps fund that. So citizens will see a lot more activity in that regard. Council also asked us to bring forth some recommendations on how they can concentrate on sidewalk maintenance. So when they go through their budget review this coming Monday, they'll hear from staff a couple of proposals that would allow for a $250,000 additional investment in the existing sidewalk network. And that's far and away more than we've spent probably altogether over the last 4 years. And it's important to take care of those things. I mean, that kind of infrastructure just erodes if you don't address it over time, and we're very fortunate to be in a position where we can think about that. If council chose to go in that direction, our relative millage rate would move from the recommended 14.89 mils up to an even 15 mils, which would still represent a slight reduction from where we are today.
So a key point there is you listen to the citizens and have responded.
Yes, it is.
Okay. We talk about public safety, commitment to police, fire, curbside, but define that a little bit more. What do we talk about good quality public safety departments?
Right. Well, it's important to recognize, first of all, that Midland is one of the safest communities in the country. We're routinely recognized as being a very family-friendly and very safe environment in which to live, work, and play. Now, public safety activity can be divided into two broad categories. You can be reactive and you can be proactive. Usually what happens when local units of government are under financial duress, the investment in public safety, if it has to go down, leaves the departments, police and fire, in a position where they're concentrating more on reacting than on being proactive. And so the investment that we make over time really allows our departments to be proactive in terms of thinking about and trying to address concerns before they become problems. So on the police side of the ledger, things like the school resource officers, where we have officers dedicated to the public school system, where they're in the buildings, they're establishing relationships with students, they're addressing issues before they become major problems. Our traffic enforcement team that has the opportunity to look at crash data and ticketing data and listen to public comments about traffic concerns so that they can concentrate on parts of the community that really need some extra attention, to mining some of the crime information that can be found on the city's website so that the Detectives Bureau and the patrol unit knows where they should be concentrating their efforts. On the fire side of the ledger, you have a department that's generally very specialized. In a community like ours, concentrating on hazardous material handling and response is very important. And so we currently host the regional hazardous response unit in our facilities. And we're in a position where we can take care of that equipment. The funding for that is gathered on a regional basis, but our staff is responsible for making sure that it's up to date, that pre-planning is taking place the way that it should, that the equipment is properly calibrated and cared for. We also are working to establish pre-planning relationships with business owners in the community. We get into the buildings, we have an opportunity to talk with them about what their concerns are and identify any hazards that might become a problem over time. So the short response is the investment puts our police department and our fire department in a position where they can head things off before they become very difficult to react to.
The comment on roads, what are some examples that motorists are going to see over the coming year that they just got to be able to We're trying to address and improve our roads, but there are going to be more orange barrels out there.
Yeah, well, let's talk about 3 projects in particular, and the first one's not the city's project. I think it's important to touch on Eastman Avenue. The Michigan Department of Transportation is making a very substantial investment in a wholesale reconstruction of the roadway on Eastman, and that project will actually kick off toward the latter part of the month of April, and it's planned to last until November. So in terms of what the motorist sees and experiences, it will be a significant disruption, and the property owners along that stretch will kind of have to grit their teeth and live with that inconvenience while that activity unfolds. Now, obviously, Eastman's a backbone in terms of vehicle transportation in the community, and it'll be a great asset when it's all done. But we're coupling a few other projects with it. We'll be doing some water main work and things of that nature while that goes on. Now, one of the projects that's not happening as a result, which is budgeted, however, is the reconstruction or resurfacing, rather, of Main Street. So we had originally intended to take that on this year. We know that Main Street is in bad shape, and we had that on our list. But given that Eastman is going to be down to restricted movement, in many cases 1 lane in each direction for extended periods of time, we thought it imprudent to also have Eastman under construction. So, those 2 things are tied together a bit. And then other major streets in the community like Wackerly Street, East Wackerly, is in fairly bad shape. That's a road that'll be resurfaced this summer. You'll see some fairly significant improvements in a litany of local streets. You can see the list on our website. And over time, if we can keep up this kind of pace for a while, we'll at least be in a position to catch up with the deterioration curve.
And these things, when we talk big picture as we have in the years past, it's important to stay on top of these things because it helps draw people to the community.
Well, not only that, but it truly is a pay me now, pay me later proposition. You either invest in maintenance on the front end, or you're going to be required to invest in reconstruction on the back end. An analogy I like to use with folks is a leaky roof in your home. If you identify a leaky roof in your home and you attack that problem right away, the repairs are usually relatively inexpensive and easy to deal with. If you ignore that problem for many years, what was once fairly easy to wrap your arms around and correct becomes not only very expensive to deal with, but very time-consuming and very disruptive. And the parallels to street maintenance are remarkable.
Now we're going to switch to people, Dave.
Okay.
And one of your favorite terms, I don't know if it's one of mine favorite yet, but accrued unfunded liabilities. What are those? First, let's define that.
So do you have 3 hours to talk about this?
I've got maybe 5 minutes.
Okay, all right. The city currently has 3 plans. One provides retiree health care to former city employees who were hired before June 30, 2005. Unless you're public safety, then it's after 2011. It also has 2 pension plans, one for police and fire, one for the civilians. And these are called defined benefit plans. And make a long story short, the city pays in every year an amount into these plans that's determined by the actuaries. The actuary says, City of Midland, if you put this much money in, then by the time folks are ready to draw on these benefits, there'll be adequate funding there. And we do that, we've always done that, and we'll continue to do that. But what happens over time is certain things happen in the stock market. If you recall, in 2000, we had the dot-com bubble go boom. And in 2008, we had the subprime market, subprime mortgage housing market go boom. Now, these plans are highly dependent upon returns from the stock market for their financial feasibility. So what happens when the stock market goes in and takes, let's say, 40% of their money away, then the money that we had set aside to fund benefits that we thought were maybe 70, 80, 90% funded are now maybe 60, 70% funded. So the unfunded liability occurs when that happens, where we have a benefit that has been earned that we had thought was paid for, but something can happen in the market to take away the funding so that it's no longer paid for. And it's not a small number. I mean, for those 3 plans in Midland alone, it's $120 million. And because of that, it's on all of our to-do lists collectively to see what we can do to try to improve the situation. Now, if there is good news on this, is we don't have to pay $120 million right away. You look at it like a variable rate line of credit, let's say. The actuaries tell us that for these benefits this year, the citywide, we're going to spend $13 million. $3 million of that is going to go for what's earned during the next year. The other $10 million is going to go towards these unfunded liabilities. So we don't pay $120 million this year, we pay 10. I would say only 10, but it's such a big number. But compared to the 120, we only pay 10. So, not sure I answered your question. You may have more questions.
Well, I think it bears pointing out, you commented on the things that are on the to-do list. There have been steps taken to try to constrain the costs associated with these plans up to this point. There have been adjustments made. The defined benefit pension plan was actually closed to civilian employees back in 2005. We've changed the benefit model, the rate of payment, the rate of cost of living increases, the years that you're eligible. There are a lot of variables that go into the nature of the benefits. That's right. So we've been actively examining those things historically for quite some time, even prior to 2005. But as Dave points out, where you end up is a function of a good number of variables, not the least of which is the performance of the markets in which those financial resources are invested. So we have to constantly monitor where we are and do what we can to control both the cost side of that equation and the payment side of that equation.
Another big topic last year, the changes in the state of Michigan's personal property tax laws, which is a big deal in Midland given the large companies we have here. The voters approved a proposal to change the law, so let's briefly recap that law change and then what has that meant to the city of Midland. I know we're early in all this.
We are early. Essentially what the law did was it provided some immediate relief on personal property tax for small business owners and small manufacturers. It allowed them to file for an exemption and not have to pay personal property tax anymore. This was the first year that would happen. We actually expected a greater utilization than we saw. We were expecting about $150,000 reduction or a change in our revenue stream, and it was about a third of that. So, it could be bigger next year. Probably the more important or bigger phase that's going to happen in a year or two is the large manufacturers. They're going to, rather than pay personal property tax as they have in the past to the city, they're going to be paying a fee to the state of Michigan, which equates to about 25% of their previous tax burden. That money will go into the state's budget, and then the state will then reimburse the local units, like the city of Midland, for the money that they used to get as personal property tax. So about 2 years from now, that's going to really kick in, and we would probably expect about upwards of 40 to 60% of what is now personal property to become exempt and then become reimbursed to us through the state through a different means.
And I want to go to John and take this back to square one for a second, just for our viewers who might not have been familiar with this over the past couple of years. But what was personal property tax role in our tax base, and can you define personal property tax versus real property tax?
Yeah, right. So
personal property versus real property.
Sure, it's been an interesting conversation. So generally, the way I explain this to people is that real property is buildings and land. And so if I were to pick up, say, a commercial building off of the ground and tip it over and shake it, all the stuff that fell out of it would be considered personal property. The fixtures, the equipment, the inventory, all that kind of stuff. And the same is true of a manufacturing asset. So in Midland, with the presence of the industrial concerns that we have here, we have historically relied on taxation of personal property on commercial and industrial concerns very significantly. I mean, we've been in a position where roughly a third of the tax proceeds within the general fund come from personal property versus real property. Now, it's important to recognize that residential property owners don't pay personal property tax. This is something that is uniquely assigned to commercial and industrial concerns. So the state of Michigan determined, and I think probably correctly, that personal property tax and the manner that it was being administered in our state was creating a disincentive to investment. And ultimately, for any community to grow, you need continued, robust investment. So in trying to solve that problem, there have been many attempts historically, ranging in the spectrum from just eliminating personal property tax to modifying the way that it gets paid. And what we've been left with in this regard is essentially a modification of the way that it gets paid. So while we would have had about just over a $10 million downside revenue risk, should it just been absolutely eliminated, we ended up with a downside risk that'll be in the neighborhood of just under $1 million. You know,
if the state is able to stick to their plan, meaning if their credits are available and the money coming in is available and what they're planning on appropriating to reimburse us, we will be made whole for the most part. What we don't know is the opportunity for the future. 10 years from now, what would we have been collected versus what we're going to get? We have no way of knowing that. But from what's on our roll now to what we expect to be reclassified a few years down the road, we're supposed to be reimbursed and made whole for that. So that's a much better outcome.
Yeah, your fundamental question is, how's it going? I think the basic response is the jury's still out.
Yeah, so far so
we're
good,
optimistic.
It's been 1 year.
Yeah.
Well, and for Midland is one of a few communities in the state that this is a major issue.
Right.
Right. There are about 50 communities across the state of Michigan for whom personal property tax represented a very significant portion of their overall tax revenue stream.
So we'll keep an eye on it.
You'll
keep an eye on it.
We'll definitely keep an eye on it. That's correct.
Okay. Well, when we come back, we're going to focus on water and sewer rates and why City Council wants your feedback.
If you're interested in taking a closer look at the City of Midland's proposed budget, it's available in the Government Information Center in the Grace A. Dow Memorial Library, at the City Clerk's office in City Hall, or online through the city's website at www.cityofmidlandmi.gov. To comment on the budget, you can attend a City Council meeting in person, call the Citizen Comment Line at 837-3400, email City Hall at midland-mi.org, or send a letter to 333 West Ellsworth, Midland, Michigan 48640.
Welcome back to Community Questions City Budget. Dave, what's going to happen to what we pay on our water and sewer bill?
Rates are going to go up just a little bit. The water rates are going to go up 2%, and sewer rates will go up about 3%. Pretty consistent with what they've done over the years. So,
any idea what that means to the average user?
Last year, the combined number was around $44, so increase. So I'll have to get after the utility department because they haven't got me that information yet. But given the consistency of our budget and the relevance of the rate increases, I would presume it's going to be close to the same.
Okay.
I'll have that for Monday night, though, I promise.
Great.
Closing thoughts when you look at the whole budget process.
Honestly, I think the budget came out better than I thought it was going to back in January. It's a pretty decent budget, if I can say that. And we all get to talk about the budget, but really there's a lot of employees back at the city who spend a lot of time sharpening their pencils and going over stuff again and again to help us end up where we are. So I think I would be remiss if I didn't at least acknowledge their efforts and extend our sincere thanks to them for putting us in the position we're in.
Well, and as one of the people who prepares a budget, not to the dollar amount, some of the other ones, but phone calls you get from different members of your staff trying to pinpoint and make sure the information's clear on their end. I can only imagine what it's like for them to keep track of so many budgets, so many different numbers.
It's daunting, but with the cooperation of staff, it's less daunting. So it all works out.
You feed them once in a while and keep them happy?
I don't know about keeping them happy, but I try to feed them once in a while, yeah.
John, your closing thoughts.
Well, the finance staff gets very happy come Memorial Day when I always promise them I won't ask them about the budget for at least 2 weeks, and then we turn around and we start talking about the next fiscal year. And I think it's very important to recognize that it's an ongoing process. I mean, this is sort of a benchmark at a point in time when you adopt a given budget. And what makes it work is that you have citizens in the community who are willing to express their perspective on the values and relate them to where the dollars are going. So they're willing to tell you what's on their mind. The city council is effective in translating that into their expectations to us, the staff, and then we can turn around and work with those targets to produce something that hopefully the council believes relates to what the community expects to see. And the departments, Dave touched on this a little bit, really do deserve a lot of credit, because if we were in an environment where every department felt it was a priority to spend every last nickel that was budgeted to them in a given fiscal year, our strategy would never work, because we carry over a substantial amount from a current fiscal year into an upcoming fiscal year of unspent yet allocated proceeds within the budget. And absent that, you know, these gaps would be very difficult to manage. So there's not a race to the bottom by any individual department. The departments all work under this understanding that we're trying to do the best thing in terms of delivering services to the citizens who own the organization.
Mayor, you gave a State of the City address back in March. What was your message?
My message was really, I thought about it a lot, because I believe that we live in a great community, and that doesn't happen by accident. And that was affirmed for me when I read Jim Collins' book, Great by Choice. And in it, he talked about greatness, and he said, greatness really isn't a function of your circumstances. It's truly a matter of conscious choice and discipline. And he went on to say that the best communities have relentless discipline. And to me, that really, with me, that is very true. And so when you think about approaches to how you go about your daily work, you know, it's easy, it's easy to do things when times are good. But when times are, and then when times are bad, you kind of hunker down and, and wait out the storm. That's not how we do it here. Here, we work hard every day, to address the issues we have and to plan for the future. And I think if you, listen to what both John and Dave were just saying about how we address our issues, even with sidewalks, we have to think about those things, well into the future. I think that that's really important about how we go about our business. I think the word that Collins used was 20-mile marchers. We work very hard at it every day. But with that said, we're also a community. And community is, people coming together. And we live, again, in a great community. And it takes all of us working together. And so at the end of the day, for me, I think it's the community, which includes, our city and the fabulous job that they do. And that's the difference. It's the Midland difference. They are the Midland difference, and they make the Midland difference.
You've heard from many citizens when you started the process last fall to get feedback, but you still want to hear from them now. How come? We do.
And that's important in case there's any new information. We're always looking to hear from them, and we always want to hear what they have to say. It's important that they see what we did with that information that they provided for us and how we use that to create the budget. So this gives them an opportunity to come and see how well we listened and how we're moving into the future, and then to get any more feedback that they have for us. So we have lots of opportunities to make that happen. Certainly, we have the budget workshop session that will start on Monday, and then we'll have the public hearings into May.
Yeah, I'll be specific with the dates and times, or our staff will later on, but yeah, they can come to meetings. How else can they give you feedback?
Well, they can get in touch with each of their council members. We're here to listen to them and what their thoughts are, and they can call the city directly and get in touch with any staff person to discuss things, that they would like information on.
And at the grocery store, as long as you're not in a hurry.
That's right.
Okay. At the end of this program, as we just talked about, we'll provide you with specific dates and times of the council meetings that are part of the budget process. Again, my thanks to you, Mayor Donker, John Lynch, City Manager, and Dave Keenan, Assistant City Manager for Financial Services, for appearing on the show again. My name is Ron Beacom. Thanks for watching this MGTV special, Community Question, City Budget.
City Council will hold several meetings to review and discuss the City Manager's proposed budget for 2015-16. A special budget workshop will be held on Monday, April 20th, beginning at 6 p.m. in Council Chambers at City Hall. The Council will hold 2 public hearings during regularly scheduled Council meetings on Mondays, April 27th and May 11th. Those meetings start at 7 p.m. Council is scheduled to adopt the budget at its meeting on Monday, May 18th, also beginning at 7 p.m. If you can't attend these meetings in person, watch them live or replayed on Midland Government Television, Channel 188 on Charter Communications, or through Channel 99 on AT&T's UVerse. Or you can view them online on the city's website at www.cityofmidlandmi.gov/mctv.